So as we approach the journey to go through the healers, I want to let the record show in front of this jury that I am confirming healers are the more diverse role when it comes to this type of choice. The legendary choice, the covenant choice, as well as your soulbind and the subsequent conduits, healers have more freedom. You know, since the dawn of time, healers have been more free to dabble in Filicraft. Theory crafting and strict choices given by numbers were more tied to tanking and to damage taken, as well as DPSing and damage done. When you enter the territory of healing, the territory of HPS, this is where Filicrafting, feeling, intuition and preference start gaining more ground, because healing is not chess. It's not a soul of the game. There is always a different opinion on what you could or should have done in different types of situations. Healing, if you think about it, is the type of role where every single pull on a boss, you will never be doing the same things you have done the pull before. You will be healing a different player, a different group of players. You might be going for different types of abilities based on how many people have just taken damage. So correctly pinpointing what legendary you would need or what covenant you would need falls way more onto preference. This leads to, as I mentioned, more choice, more freedom, and generally more enjoyable and generally more, you know, interactive legendaries. Whereas other roles would be more tied to something very specific and very strict, although boring, like Brynador's Might for Blood Death Knight or Stormstout Last Keg for Brewmaster Monks. These are very, very boring. They are very, very strong, but boring. And you have to take them because the numbers say so. But for healers, we have more freedom. So let's go and explore the freedom. Straight into having more choice with the example of Restoration Druid, who says, fuck all the other healers, I'm going Night Fae. You know, most of the other healers have a modicum of respect, but Restoration Druid, obviously being a druid, it's just a filthy role-playing furry, so of course they're going Night Fae. And their depravation is so ingrained in their character that they are going for Night Fae for pretty much all content, because Convoke the Spirits is a very, very powerful covenant ability. We can talk about a little bit Kindred Spirits and Adaptive Swarm before going deeper into Convoke the Spirits. Those are better covenants for single target. If we were to pinpoint an actual weakness of Restoration Druid, it would be single target healing as opposed to their AoE spread healing. And Adaptive Swarm is obviously very powerful, not just because of the heal over time it puts on the target, but also because of the increased periodic effects on that target by 20%. You being a Restoration Druid, this is very, very powerful for single target. Similar story for Kindred Spirits. You have the ability to give you an extra 1 minute cooldown, essentially giving you a mini beacon to duplicate some healing on an additional target, as well as the tank bonding for an extra powerful cooldown, but these are both for single target. The more all-round uses are Convoke the Spirits and Ravenous Frenzy. Now, Ravenous Frenzy was the one, you know, ahead in the polls to win the election, but a series of nerfs have weakened Ravenous Frenzy severely compared to Convoke the Spirits. So now Convoke the Spirits is just the flat-out stronger covenant for Druid. Convoke the Spirits also has the benefit of working depending on your form, meaning that on top of being strong for healing, which it is, you can go in Mythic Plus, for example, play, let's say, with Balance Affinity, and then shift into Moonkin form and use Convoke the Spirits. This is going to turn Convoke the Spirits into an extra damaging ability, as it is going to add to its list of possibly usable abilities your affinity abilities for more damage, not just healing. So for both raiding as well as Mythic Plus, for both healing and for both damage, this is just the overall stronger covenant. Now when we look at the legendaries, the strongest legendaries have been nerfed a little bit over time, as expected. First, the honorable mentions of legendaries that aren't really up to par, but might still have a use. They are still pretty valuable and viable. One is Circle of Life and Death. This is very passive. This is a very tank-esque legendary, giving you extra effectiveness on your heal and damage over time abilities, as well as Verdant Infusion, particularly powerful in Mythic Plus, where you can cover the tank in your heal over times. Even better if you're playing Necrolord with Adaptive Swarm, and then just Swift Mend it to keep up all the hots on the target with just one GCD, and keep doing your, cut weaving or chicken weaving damage. But the real stronger ones, really, are the Dark Titan Lesson and the Memory of the Mother Tree. Memory of the Mother Tree as a very flavorful RNG element, which might not be enjoyed by some, but the sheer strength of casting a quadruple rejuvenation or a quadruple regrowth is just too powerful. You, as a Resto Druid, have also ways to empower this. For regrowth, for example, you can talent into Abundance to make it stronger. It is just a very good sustained HPS legendary. The other one, very flavorful as well, is the Dark Titan's Lesson. Goes without saying that a lot of the strength of this legendary goes together with photosynthesis. Essentially cheating, and you can now use both effects of photosynthesis at the same time. Not only that, but double Life Bloom is going to mean double the chance to proc Omen of Clarity. So both of these legendaries are a clear standout compared to the others, and there is no, particular synergy you're going to have with the Covenants, because you just have one straight up better Covenants than the rest, being Convoke the Spirits. Now we move on to my favorite to second favorite healer spec to play, which is Mistweaver Monk. So before we go into the actual stronger stuff, we go for some mentions. Let's not mention Clouded Focus, since it's a legendary that empowers your single target, and as a Mistweaver Monk, you are already more than strong enough on single target to be able to go for this. It might be good for progression when it comes to mana management, because it is actually quite mana heavy, the playstyle of Mistweaver, but in general it's just too weak. The mention I wanted to make was Fist Weaving. So, healing through doing damage as a Mistweaver Monk, which used to be and had been alive for a long time. So, your monk already went to school, he already went to study the teachings of the monastery to give him some synergy when it comes to Fist Weaving. You already have in the pre-patch the ability to go for Invoke Chi-Ji as a talent to give you even more synergy off of healing with your damage, as well as obviously Rising Mist for extra healing. In Shadowlands you will be able to pair this all off with the ancient teachings of the monastery. You went back to school, you got your degree, and now you get an extra way to heal targets while doing damage. Now, the reason why it is just a mention is because numerically it is too weak. I think particularly as long as your spinning crane kick that you have baseline as Mistweaver now, as long as it doesn't heal when you use it outside of Chi-Ji, which is a 3-minute cooldown, which is very long, I don't think Fist Weaving is going to be the meta way to play. So let's go and talk about the actual meta way to play, the two stronger legendaries, Tear of Morning and Yulon's Whisper. So Yulon's Whisper is rather simple. You have Thunder Focus Tea, which is already a cooldown on its own, and now that cooldown is going to have the extra effects of Yulon's Whisper. These effects have just been nerfed by quite a bit. They used to do 150% spell power multiplied by 3, was nerfed down to 60%, and that is still one of your better legendaries, so that shows you how overtuned it was. It is very strong in raids and also of course in Mythic Plus, where you will be able to hit your entire party with it. And then you have Tear of Morning. Tear of Morning is likely stronger in Mythic Plus than in raids. It has been reworked quite a few times. Now, the initial effect, the first effect, is not very powerful. It is cool if you manage to get your Renewing Mist to spread to another target rather than to jump. So you basically duplicate your Renewing Mist, which is very powerful, but it's only a 10% chance. It's not what you're here for. You're here for the second effect, increasing the healing of Vivify through Renewing Mist by 20%, and now giving your Enveloping Mist also the ability to heal all targets affected by Renewing Mist for 20% of its healing. In case you're new to Monk, the whole base rotation way for Monk to heal multiple targets beyond their only AoE ability Essence Font is to use Renewing Mist on multiple targets. It has a 9-second recharge on 2 charges. You can use the aforementioned Thunder Focus Tea to give it an extra base duration, so you can make it stick for longer. And then once you have Renewing Mist out on, say, 3 targets, you can then use something like Vivify to heal all targets affected by Renewing Mist. Now, with this legendary, Tear of Morning, Vivify is going to be even stronger, and also Enveloping Mist is going to apply. It is very, very powerful, especially after Yulon's Whisper, pretty big nerf. In Mythic Plus, this is going to be very, very good. Now, when it comes to your Covenants, for Mistweaver, in a similar way of Brewmaster, Necrolord is very powerful, as well as Kyrian. They are sort of sharing the same benefits, mostly because your Fallen Order Conduit for Ventir, as well as your Feline Stomp, have been nerfed quite a bit over time. Bone Dust Brew for Necrolord with the Conduit, again, Bone Marrow Hips is very good. and it has a short enough cooldown that you can use it in every single iteration of high spikes of damage taken. And then when it comes to Kyrian, it's just a big cooldown. It is also worth mentioning that this is even better for Mistweaver than it is for Brewmaster, since the benefit of this effect for Brewmaster is that Keg Smash is going to do increased damage, which is not very relevant for a tank, particularly in raid encounters, whereas the benefit for Mistweaver is that now Essence Font is going to get an extra burst of healing at the start and at the end of the channel, which is good because you're a healer and this effect is healing, which is pretty fitting. So the choices are both pretty nice for Mistweaver, both for Covenants and for Legendaries. Still hoping that Mistweaving is going to make a comeback. Now, blitzing through one of these specs, we are going through Holy Paladin. Pretty quick because I've already gone through this on the Filicraft video, the two different ways that Holy Paladin can use to heal. One is the Crusader's Might with Holy Shock and Glimmer of Light build, and the other one is the old school hard-casted Holy Light. The hard-casted Holy Light build, now with the Conduit, Resplendent Light, the Infusion of Light passive that they always had, and the buffed spell power scaling of their Holy Light is going to make it a much stronger build. Malicious minds could say that the Glimmer build has been made so weak that now the Holy Light build looks strong, but I'm not gonna go into that. When it comes to Covenants though, either way, either style, Divine Toll is still easily the strongest. Blessing of Summer is essentially a failed experiment for Night Fae. Vanquisher's Hammer is still undertuned, doesn't have a strong enough effect. Yes, the cooldown is pretty short, but it's not enough. You only have the choice of Ashen Hallow and Divine Toll, and Ashen Hallow doesn't really give you anything for a 4-minute cooldown. You thirst as a Holy Paladin for any sort of synergy you can get with your wings, with your Avenging Wrath, and the only thing Ashen Hallow is going to give you, which is enabling the usage of Hammer of Wrath and giving it double damage, which is cool for doing damage, but not much else. Which is why you just default back to Divine Toll. Not only is it very good because it's healing, because it's Holy Power generation, it is very good because if you are playing with the Glimmer build, particularly Mythic Plus, it's going to be mostly used just for Mythic Plus, the Glimmer build. Divine Toll is essentially a 1-minute cooldown that can guarantee the application of Glimmer of Light on your entire party. Glimmer of Light lasting 30 seconds means Divine Toll can give you a 50% uptime of Glimmer on your entire party. It makes it very, very powerful for that build. When it comes to Legendaries, you have a couple of good mentions. Shadowbreaker, Dawn of the Sun, it is a pretty good raid legendary to use. You can get many hits on a 40-yard long Light of Dawn, a 40-yard wide Light of Dawn, making all the targets receive 20% more healing for 6 seconds. It's very good for burst. Another mention can be Marad's Dying Breath. This is for more expert Paladin players because that's going to be a lot of damage you're going to be taking. By default, you cannot gain the benefit of the Beacon of Light when you use Light of the Martyr. It's only going to heal one target and not the beacon, but this legendary is going to bypass that, as well as increasing the heal of your Light of the Martyr. But the real stronger legendary here is going to be Inflorescence of the Sunwell. Obviously, going back to a Holy Light build, Empowering Infusion of Light is going to be very powerful. So this is going to be the legendary you will be going with in raids. You can go with this in Mythic Plus as well. Otherwise, you can go for the default, passive and more boring Relentless Inquisitor. Same reason why Retribution can go with the legendary, because Haste, at the start of the expansion when you're starved for stats, is still very good. Even when you're going with the Holy Shock build, you can still go for Shock Barrier, you can still go for spreading your Holy Shock, tagging people with Glimmer of Light and giving it an extra defense capability of Shock Barrier. However, this is still very, very defensive. It doesn't give you any offensive output. This is the state right now for Holy Paladin. I do hope, being a boomer myself, that the hard-casted Holy Light build is going to be the way to go still, and Blizzard doesn't, end up buffing, over-buffing the Glimmer of Light build. I would at least wish for an option to be there for Paladin players to choose whichever they want and not just being forced to go in one of the two, but we will have to see. Now, the next spec, going over to Priest, starting with Discipline. When it comes to the Covenants, there is one clear winner for Discipline because of the way it works with Atonement. And then you have the second one, which is also because of the way it works with Atonement. I'm talking about Ventir and Mind Games and Kyrian and Boon of the Ascended. Obviously, Discipline does damage, and then the spell damage you do gets converted into healing through Atonement, meaning Mind Games is very powerful because it is going to do very heavy spell damage on the target. It is going to be worth almost 3 penance casts worth of damage in one ability on a 45-second cooldown, and of course when you have tagged multiple players with Atonement, that equals to a lot of healing. You can increase that with something like Schism, increase that with more, damage buffs on yourself to get even more out of your Mind Game Covenant ability. It is also a pretty good single target ability since it's going to absorb, prevent some of the damage, which makes it very powerful, as well as Boon of the Ascended for Kyrian. It works in a similar way, because you can now gain access to Ascended Nova and Ascended Blast instead of Smite, stack up the damage while doing AoE damage with Ascended Nova and then blow it up in a big explosion. In a similar way, it is spell damage, it works with Atonement, which is very powerful for Discipline. The Vent tier 1, it is simply stronger because it has a 45-second cooldown. It is more easy to use and to manage. It is only a single ability, meaning it is going to fit very well into your Schism window, whereas your Boon of the Ascended is a very big 3-minute cooldown. It is a little bit harder to be able to maintain. When it comes to your legendaries, unfortunately, there is a risk we are going back to the days of Mist of Pandaria, where Spirit Shell was an abomination, because Clarity of Mind is your strongest legendary for raids. When it comes to Discipline, the mana discount is already very powerful, but on top of that you can extend the duration of Atonements through your Rapture or Spirit Shell. And this is just very powerful raid healing, because it's not healing, it's absorbing, it's preventing. It is the strongest type of, so to speak, healing in the game, when you can prevent the damage from even coming in the first place. When it comes to Mythic Plus, this is obviously, more complicated to use in a Mythic Plus environment where the damage is more constant and it's going to be harder for you to build up a big Spirit Shell window in Mythic Plus. You can go for a variety of different legendaries. Twins of the Sun Priestess allows you to double Power Infusion on one other target in your party, which can be very powerful for burst windows on your DPS. This would, however, mark you as the cuck of the group. You would be going the perfect stereotype of the heal slut, buffing other players. You should be ashamed. The more simple one and viable one is the Penitent one. Simply more and higher uptime on your penance ceiling and penance damage. As well as the last one, this is the more single target related option, is going to be Measured Contemplation. This is more powerful on self-sufficient tanks. Tanks that can most of the time get through a lot of the damage through your Atonement only, like a Death Knight, and might only need 1 or 2 windows of high healing. So if you can stockpile the stacks of your Shadowman through just healing your self-sufficient tank with Atonement, when it's actually needed to hard cast some heals on him, you're going to have a heavily empowered Shadowman on the target. But there is a more varied list of options for Mythic Plus compared to raids, where Clarity of Mind is just very powerful. Now on to the little brother of Discipline, we have Holy. Now for Holy Priest, in similar fashion of Discipline, Kyrian is very powerful as a big cooldown. The difference though is that Discipline can use Atonement, meaning Mind Games for Vent tier is still very powerful because the strongest part of the Vent tier Covenant is the big chunk of damage, something that Holy Priest can't really benefit from. Night Fae Guardians is very disappointing, so Holy Priest is left with the other Covenant, the Necrolord, Unholy Nova. Strictly speaking, Unholy Nova is more disappointing than the other Covenants. Holy Priest is basically going Unholy Nova because there isn't anything that much better. It is a better use of a Covenant ability during Prideful, which is going to be our first season affix in Mythic Plus. However, Holy Priest already had a pretty good way of doing consistent heal over time during Prideful. He didn't need the extra help of the Necrolord's Unholy Nova. So for Holy Priest, it's more of a case of not having a very well-tuned and synergistic Covenant as opposed to Discipline. When it comes to legendaries, they have one really good standout legendaries, which is Harmonious Apparatus. One man, one day, was hoping for Divine Image to be viable. It is a pretty good, flavorful legendary. However, that Naru is a hack and doesn't heal for shit, so the only stronger legendary option there is Harmonious Apparatus. Very flavorful legendary. Very nice synergy with your kit. It works very well. It has a very good synergy with talents like Light of the Naru and Apotheosis, which work with further reducing the cooldown of your holy wards, which are very powerful, particularly Serenity, your single target heal, and a small mention to Zanshi, simply because of progress. In raid encounters, during progress, the only thing you care about is stay alive to try the encounter, and Holy Priest at least has the option, since they don't have the option of having a good defensive for themselves, they can have an entire legendary item just so they can stay alive. But, jokes aside, Harmonious Apparatus is a very nice legendary, one of the nicest ones in the way it works, in the way it synergizes with your kit. It is very cool. And now, on to the last spec. I particularly ship this new version of Shaman after the buffs to the single target heals in their spell power scaling. We now have a nice legendary tune towards Riptide. Riptide being buffed, being giga buffed, at now having 170% spell power healing, now having a talent that actually makes sense having, like Torrent, for even stronger healing, and of course still having Echo of the Elements, giving you 2 charges of Riptide. You can now make it even stronger with Primal Tidecore. Every 4 casts, you get a 5th free cast. This becomes particularly stronger when you will be going for one of the Covenant choices you can go for, that is very powerful, which is Necrolord. Necrolord is going to give you something you don't have, something that is very nice for your kit, which is an instant ability that heals and instantly applies Riptide. After applying the target with Riptide, it's going to make your next healing wave hit all targets affected by your Riptide. This is very nice, because you don't really need any more AoE as Resto Shaman. I went through this already. Resto Shaman is dripping in AoE abilities. What they need is more spot healing, is more on-demand, quick and fast single target heals. And Necrolord's Covenant helps you in that regard. The other 2 Covenants you can go for are much more simple, AoE tuned, Kyrian and Ventir. Ventir is not as powerful as Kyrian, it is just simpler to use. It has a 30-second longer cooldown. Even if it can be reduced by crits, it is still a longer cooldown by base. It also heals for less. It heals for the same amount, but Vesper Totem hits 6 targets instead of 5, and it has a shorter cooldown. The only benefit of the Ventir Covenant is that it is going to hit all the targets, basically one after the other very quickly, and is going to jump to them, even if they are further away, further apart. Whereas Kyrian, it is just going to be centered around their totem. So you first have to drop the totem down, and then you have to cast 3 healing abilities, and all the targets have to be inside the totem. So they have to be within the totem range. So it is harder to gain the full value of the totem, but if you do, it is easily better than Ventir. The other bonus, obviously, is that being Kyrian, you gain access to the Vial of Serenity, and the fact that it is a Covenant that allows you to split the instances of damage and the instances of healing. You can drop down the totem and cast 3 heals to gain the healing effect of the totem, and then you can reposition the totem and use 3 damaging abilities to gain the effects of the damage ones. So it is way more versatile than Chain Harvest. Back to the legendaries, you can still go just fine in Mythic Plus with Primal Tidecore, but you can go for the maximum meme of Chains of Devastation. It is a very, very fun legendary. It is going to make both of your Chain Lightning and Chain Heal instacasts. 50% more damage on Chain Lightning and no mana cost on Chain Heal. This is particularly big. And don't forget that by default your Chain Heal has a 2.5 second cast time. So weaving in an instacast Chain Heal, an instacast Chain Lightning and an instacast Chain Heal, you're not actually delaying your heals in Mythic Plus if you use this. You are in fact being faster at casting Chain Heal while also doing damage. So not only is it very nice, not only that does it fix one of your issues of Shaman in Mythic Plus, being that you have quite good damage, but your problem is that you're not a Resto Druid, you can't do damage while you are healing. This is going to give you a big hand on that regard. On top of that, as you alternate Chain Lightning and Chain Heal, you can always store an instacast Chain Heal for when big bursts of damage are coming out. On top of your Riptide being much stronger as an insta-heal, on top of being a Necrolord with an instacast Primordial Wave for single target heal, now you also have an instacast Chain Heal if you're playing with Chains of Devastation. Your oh shit buttons become more and more, which is good for you. And with this we have gone over all of our healers. And you can see that in the end the variety of Covenants is definitely more apparent. Beyond the poor Night Fae, beyond the Night Fae and their furry convention only visited by Resto Druids, Necrolord, Ventir and Kyrian all have their uses on the other healer specs, more varied, so to speak, than tanks, and most of these healer specs are going to choose their Covenant ability purely based on the strength of the Covenant ability itself and not as much on the passive effects, like tanks would. So I believe this is positive for healers. Tell me what you guys think. Similar to tanks, which one of you is going to get banished from the raiding group or Mythic Plus because they wanted to look cool and they chose a terrible Covenant? Raise your hand. What we have left is going to be melee DPS and range DPS. They are probably going to be split in a couple of videos since, as you can see, these videos are getting pretty long. But for now, this is enough. I take my leave. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, yes, Blizzard, please still nerf Kyrian.